Natural Resources University is pleased to introduce one of our newest series, Timber University, hosted by Dr. Brady Self and Dr. Sean Tanger.
Welcome to Timber University, a podcast brought to you by the Mississippi State University Forestry Extension Team. I'm Sean Tanger.
And I'm Brady Self. We're both forestry specialists covering topics ranging from soils to silviculture to social sciences as they pertain to forest stewardship.
In this podcast, we'll extend research findings that are relevant to forest landowners, consultants, loggers, and other natural resource professionals.
If you fall into one of those categories, we'll help you explore historical and current science that you can apply to your practical forestry knowledge and experience. Hi everybody, this is Brady Self. I'm a professor at Mississippi State University and work with the Extension Service, and we are sitting in Simpson County about to start our inaugural Timber University podcast, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Sean Tanger, who's also an extension specialist with the group. And what we want to do is have kind of a generalized podcast where we answer questions, we discuss things that are pertinent into forestry and the forest industry across the South. And basically our first podcast, what we want to do is offer basically some type of an introduction to ourselves and our group, who we are, what we do, and that kind of thing for the listenership out there as we move forward with this particular podcast. So what I want to do is start off with a little bit of who we are, where we come from, something about our career and our background, and just general information about what we're about. And I want to let Sean start that off, and I'll let him kind of do his own little intro here.
Yeah, thanks, Brady. Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Sean Tanger with Mississippi State Forestry Extension. We're, as Brady mentioned, we met halfway. We're sitting here in Simpson County between both of our offices, and just giving you a little bit of background about ourselves. My focus area is economics, management, finance, taxation. So I tend to approach things, obviously, as compared to Brady or some of our other colleagues within forestry extension. I approach things from that economic lens, and certainly that's a section that weighs heavy in forest land ownership and forest land ownership decisions. And so what we're going to be doing as we go through these podcasts is each topic that we cover, either through interviews or through conversations like these between Brady and I, we're going to try to give you both of those perspectives. He'll cover more of the biological side of things. I'll cover more of the economic side of things, and we'll try to give you those two perspectives and see how they can actually be blended together to give you a more comprehensive picture of your timberland management. A little bit of background on myself. I did my degree work at Auburn University. I grew up in Auburn, actually. My grandfather was a professor there, and strangely enough, my dad, perhaps in an act of rebellion, decided to become a logger. The academic life wasn't for him. So as a young kid, essentially a 10-year-old, as a 6-foot, 200-pound 10-year-old, I was introduced to the world of logging, short log logging, at an early age. And anybody who works in logging now or has done short logging in the past understands how difficult a job that is. And so at an early age, I had a really good appreciation for forestry business generally, but I knew logging's probably not for me. Working in those summer months, such as we are now, being outside all day, it takes quite a toll on you. And it's very dangerous work. Interestingly, kind of going into the economics of it, I remember when I first started out with my dad, a day's work, he would bring home anywhere from $130 to $150 for bringing in, anywhere from a cord to 2 cords of wood. Typically more on the one side. It was difficult, especially if you don't have a boom loader, and at first we didn't. But I remember distinctly the last load he carried into the wood yard that we would go to near Auburn. He got around $45, and for a day's work like that, $45 doesn't cut it. So at an early age, even though I didn't quite realize it, I saw how economics and technology and the cost of doing business can affect a lot of the forest stakeholders. In this case, an employee who worked as a self business owner who worked in logging, was essentially pushed out of the industry because the economies of scale and the cost didn't make sense for him anymore. So that's really how I approached it. Again, I think my grandfather being a professor, I kind of took both of those worlds and just smashed them together, and here I sit. Before I got here, I've been here around 3 years. Before I got here, I was at LSU for 6 years, worked as the RREA statewide extension program leader. And I worked in economics over there, but I didn't have the finance and tax portions that I have now. It was one of the allures of coming over here was working with a big team and of also being able to branch out my knowledge set and work on timber taxation, which, in large part is typically one of the major concerns, interest areas for landowners, forest landowners like yourselves. So felt like it would be an important topic to get studied up on and to be able to deliver outreach and extension programs and things like that to y'all.
All right. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. I knew some of that about you, but one thing I got to ask, 6 foot tall at 10 years old. Mm-hmm. Yep. Nobody in my family's 6 foot tall, man. That's interesting.
Everybody kind of quits growing in my family after about 12.
Huh. Yeah. Okay. Well, heck, I've never seen anything above 5'9", so, and I'm the tallest one in the family. But you definitely had a more straightforward path, and I guess target for your career. I'm more of a mutt with the way things happen with me. I am one of the very few people I think that works for MSU that's actually from Mississippi at the faculty level. I grew up in northeast Mississippi, Union County in particular, and both my parents were public school teachers, both retired with 30 plus years in the system, and kind of my direction was don't be a teacher. Mad respect, but not for me. So what I wound up doing, teaching older people. So that's just that's the career path. But started out, even in high school, I knew, not for any really set specific reason, but I always knew I wanted to be outdoors and work out, work in that, in the outside, so to speak. To begin with, actually, I thought about wildlife biology, which actually you've got some of in your background too. And that's really kind of what my target was at the time until, as my old major prof said, hardest working group of paupers he ever met in his life. And kind of saw that right off the bat. Never intended to go all the way through school as far as going at the PhD level, but things just kind of fell into place as they came. But I say I'm a mutt. Originally, like I said, I was kind of a split between wildlife and forestry. And once I got to the grad school level, I decided to move over into straight up forestry and did the master's and the PhD there here at MSU. But it's kind of interesting. I can say I've worked for MDWF&P. If you go far enough back, I worked as a consultant for a little while. I worked for private, when I say private industry, small industry. I worked for big industry, an R&D group. I worked for a wildlife agency in another state, and I worked actually here in the state for the Corps of Engineers. So I've done a little bit of all of it, both state and federal and industry, and then done a little on my own before I hired into this particular position. So where you do, I like to say, smooth voodoo with economics, I'm more of the I don't want to say the cold, hard facts and science of growing trees. You'll hear, things called, especially in hardwoods, which is really where my specialty is. You'll hear silviculture talked about as a basically an art form, and it's not. It's just it's an applied science, but it's a little more difficult than something like pine management. But we're all taught pines going through school, but I wound up specializing in hardwood management, and then by nature of who I was in grad school with Andy Ezel. In grad school with Andy Ezel, I became a forest herbicide guy. And the problem with forest herbicides is nothing, and hardwoods too, is nothing's ever textbook. Nothing's ever specifically going to have a black and white answer that you can throw out there. You think it's going to, but it doesn't. You wind up having to, be a forester. You have to actually think about things and come up with maybe between the black areas, right? We get into gray, and you move off into realms that aren't necessarily the most easily understood. So it's an experiential thing where you just pick up more and more and more when you work, especially with hardwoods, where you work more and more and more in that field and get proficient. I've been in this job for right at 10 years. It'll be 10 years next month as the Northwest Extension Forester stationed out of Grenada. Because of the drawdown of the group, I'm winding up pulling the north half right now, but at the same time, just like you with statewide responsibilities and economics and taxes, I do hardwoods and herbicides, and to a certain extent, forest health and even pine silviculture. Just exactly like you by nature of the job, you have to be kind of jack of all trades, master of none, where you wind up having to fill in a lot of different realms. So. Great job. Extension's an awesome place to work. You get to meet new people. You're not sitting in the same place doing the same thing all the time, which is really what attracted me to it to begin with. You get to meet a lot of people, see a lot of cool things, and it's always something different. So you always hear people say, "I've got the best job in the world." I really feel like I do. If you can be happy 80% of the time, you're sitting above about 75% of people. That's the way I look at it. There's always something you don't like, but great job, great place to work, and really looking forward to moving forward with this, this podcast as we go forward, which we were approached with earlier this year by kind of a tie-in with Deere University, which is run by Bronson Strickland and Steve Damaris there on campus with in Starkville with MSU. Where we're going to be kind of a tie-in and basically our subscriber list is going to go straight into their subscriber list. Hopefully it takes off and this particular podcast really becomes something where we have just another way of reaching out and meeting a lot of new people and getting the word out. That's the goal for it. That's kind of my background, kind of where I came from, and my view on extension and where we move forward in the future. We talked a little bit about wanting to keep this thing short. We're already sitting at 12 minutes here, but what I want to do now, I guess, is talk a little bit about kind of our overall goals for the podcast. And you kind of mentioned that before we started this. My goal is to provide conversational, straightforward, rubber meets the road kind of information for landowners. And I'll let you cover kind of our list of where we're moving forward as far as the agenda for upcoming podcasts in your second, because you got them written down. But that's kind of my goal for the whole thing, is to offer landowners a way they can just tune in. They don't have to show up to a program. They don't have to actually be there in person, and give them the high points. Just the high points. Hit those peaks as we move through whatever topic we're talking about, and offer something that folks can at least get their mind moving in the direction that they want to move to obtain whatever goal they so choose.
Yeah, I'll echo some of Brady's comments earlier. The interaction with the landowners and the other extension professionals and people in industry, as well as all the different forest stakeholders, that's where a lot of the experiential stuff comes from. It's not just my own, experimental stuff or research that I'm doing that's applied work. It is those things, but it's all of those other interactions that we really find value in. I've become much better at my job by keeping my ears open to listen to other people and what they have to say.
Sure.
So it's been great being over here, and it was similar in that role at LSU as well. But so again, not belaboring it too long. You and I are both good talkers. Like I said, we want to approach all these topics that we're gonna cover with our differing backgrounds, with the interest of maximizing whatever you're looking to get out of your property as landowners, as stakeholders. Again, I come at it from more of a dollars and cents perspective. Whereas as Dr. Self comes at it more from the biology and silviculture background. But you got to have both of those two hands in order to do this to its best ability. And so I think it's a good matchup. We're going to take a few. It's going to take a few episodes to get the thing running just like we want. But basically, what we have in mind as far as an outlook is to take you as the landowner through the entire process of forest land ownership. And interspersed within that will be timely topics that we'll cover. So for instance, our next podcast will be about goals and objectives for forest landowners. After that, we'll talk about reforestation or putting trees into the ground on an old field site or a cutover or whatever it may be. But then we might take a pause in that process and talk about carbon markets for timber, right? That's a timely issue. Maybe there's a new tax issue on the horizon that's going to be important to forest landowners. We may take time out to talk about that. So we'll take a very long path to what I mentioned at the beginning of from start to finish owning a timber asset, a timber property, and then within that we're gonna hit highlight topics that we think y'all might find interesting. As well, to kind of finish up for me, we've got our ideas, but you're the listeners, and we want y'all to stay interested and keep listening. So we'd like to hear from you as well about topics that you might want to hear, also questions and things like that you may have that we could answer on the podcast. So there will also be, as the things I mentioned previously, we'll also occasionally have a Q&A podcast where we'll just collect up 10 questions or so, or however long it takes for each question, and we'll answer those on the podcast so that you'll have them for posterity and you can listen into those. Obviously you can reach out to us with phone calls and through meetings and things like that, but we want the podcast to be another outlet for that interaction, for a way for you as landowners to get answers.
Absolutely, and I think the Q&A thing really brings a lot of pertinency for a lot of people, because there's a lot of people that don't show up. I mean, we know that. That's one of the biggest things we fight, that we battle with extension or outreach as a whole, is trying to get people to show up to hear us talk, right? And that's a very great way. And not that I've really asked questions, I guess, in that particular manner, but I listen to a fair amount of podcasts myself, and I kind of enjoy the Q&A sessions that you hear with them. And again, like you said, it's another way that we can have some interaction with people that we may or may not be able to meet with in a normal setting, normal, traditional, I guess I should say, outreach setting, where we're able to maybe help some people that wouldn't get it otherwise.
Sure.
One other thing I do want to point out in there is that how to say that, I guess, with tact and clarity. That's one of the things that I have no intention of doing, I guess, where we bring in, where we talk about things that we don't know. I mean, that's the goal of this is, certain academic types have the reputation of, just getting up and talking about things they don't know about. I don't ever want to do that, and I want the listeners out there to understand that if we don't know, we're not going to cover it. And if we don't know, and it's something that we need to know about, we'll bring in somebody. That's the goal. That's the beauty of outreach and extension. The network that's out there of people that we have access to, it's pretty deep, pretty wide, and it seems to be pretty easy to get people to agree to sign on to a podcast. So that's the goal, to bring in other experts. You're not just going to be listening to us. We already have a few ideas of people that, at a regional level at least, that we could bring in to talk about some, like you said, time appropriate, time sensitive topics like the carbon talk you just mentioned, and estate planning and things like that Yep. We've already kind of reached out and have an interest by people to sign on and help us out with. So not just us that folks are going to listen to. They can do that anytime they want, but actually bring some other people to the dance that bring some good information to the listeners. That's really about all I have for that pops to the top of my mind for this particular podcast. Anything you want to add here at the end?
No, I think we covered it pretty well, and we'll go ahead and next podcast we'll talk about goals and objectives as a timberland owner. Just general. It'll be a little less technical, a little more conceptual, and kind of that art versus science that Dr. Self mentioned. We'll get into kind of this first step that you as a landowner have to get settled in your mind in order to then manage the forest going forward. It's all going to hinge on, what you want to do. How you start out and how you finish is going to be a function of, what you want out of the property, going forward. And those things don't always stay the same. They're not static, but at least starting out and conceptualizing that in your head so that you can write management plans and coordinate with whoever else may own the property and so on and so forth. So that's really, I think, it for us for this episode. But looking forward to talking with y'all in the future, either by email or by phone. And we hope you enjoy this episode, and we hope you enjoy the ones we've got coming up as well.
Sure. Looking forward to it. And with that, I think we're going to sign off.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Absolutely. The Timber University podcast has been brought to you by Mississippi State University Extension Forestry.
If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email us at timberuniversity, one word, @gmail.com.